Today is Wednesday, February 29th, 2012.
Leap year.
Yes, every 4 years we get that opportunity.
Yeah.
Very special. My name is Ulla Merz, and I'm here to interview Lyle Davis, who has been instrumental in shaping the Boulder County Farmers Market. This interview is being recorded for the Maria Rogers Oral History Program as part of the collection Recording the History of the Boulder County Farmers Market. I have with me Anne-Marie Poise, who is filming the interview. Welcome, Lyle.
Hi, good to see you.
I want to begin today by asking you to give us a short biographical sketch when and where you were born and how you came to Boulder.
Okay, I was born in 1952 in New York. My family lived in an area not dissimilar from where I live now, outside of Boulder, but we were about 50 miles north of New York City. It was a 200-year-old farmhouse. We had, it wasn't a farm, but we had large gardens and creek running through, and my mom was an avid gardener and a wonderful cook. She was raised in France. So it was kind of my first initiation into the whole kind of field to table, what the French call potager, one who cooks from the garden. So it's my background, and I came to Boulder in, actually came to Colorado in 1974. My dad was given through Rutgers University a greenhouse grant to do experiments with hydroponic greenhouses south of, kind of outside Colorado Springs. And those were the days when the Israelis were growing lots of tomatoes and cucumbers, and ours was an experiment to see what kind of food production we could do in what would typically be a kind of hostile environment. It was the high plains. And so we had a ranch in what's Elbert County, very remote area. And I would come to Boulder on weekends because I had a good childhood friend who was here, and my cousins lived here. So, you know, to have fun, get away, I would come up every weekend and stay in Boulder. And when the greenhouse project ended, then kind of moved here permanently in '76.
Oh, so tell me a little bit more about the greenhouse project. So what did you grow?
It was a variety of vegetables. Tomatoes and cucumbers were the primary crops, but we experimented with okra and summer squash just to see kind of a plethora of vegetables. And you know, Elbert County was very high. It was the high plains, lots of wind, lots of sun, good greenhouse conditions, but you know, impossible to grow vegetables outside. So.
And what's hydroponic?
That was using liquid nutrients where the plants are grown. We were growing in 5-gallon pots, basically with perlite and inert matter, and then nutrients were fed directly to the plants through liquid solutions.
And what was the result of the project?
That, you know, you could definitely do it, but it was, I think hydroponics, you know, other than the guys doing it now for the med shops, kind of went out of favor. There was a lot of expense involved. So, you know, we've never seen, I mean, although there's areas of Colorado where you do see extensive hydroponic growing. In fact, there's a big area in Colorado, I think by Princeton Hot Springs, where they do a number of tomatoes and things. But that you could certainly grow a variety of vegetables that way, but there was definitely expense involved.
So what did you do when you came to Boulder then? Well,
I think I traveled around Europe for a year or so because I'd been working so kind of intensively with my dad on the greenhouses, a lot of isolation. So I took a year off and traveled around Europe and Africa. And when I came back, with my friends Haas Hassan and Mark Retzloff, we started Pearl Street Market. That was kind of the genesis to what would become Alfalfa's markets. So that was in 1979 we started Pearl Street Market, excuse me, and then in 1983 we opened Alfalfa's markets. And that's, you know, I was involved, as I said, I was a founder, and I was involved with Alfalfa's for 18 years. until we were finally bought out by Wild Oats. And I was ready for a change from retail, and they had a company culture that I didn't really connect with. So that's when I went full-time on the farm.
So when did you first hear about the Boulder County Farmers Market? Do you remember?
Yeah, I do. I mean, I can't pinpoint the exact year, but my introduction is kind of unusual in that I didn't start farming until 1993. That's when we bought our land that became Pastures of Plenty. But my involvement with the market predates that. One, Chet Anderson, who's a very good friend of mine, Chet had worked for me at Alfalfa's. You know, he then later proved to be my mentor in doing these market farms. But Chet worked for me, so he was one of the original guys going down to the mall before the current market was opened on 13th Street. During that time, and I'm not sure the year, 85 maybe, another good friend of mine, Kathy Coyne, who was a longtime director of the food bank, what do you call it again? Community Food Chair. Community Food Chair. Yeah, she was a longtime director. The city had approached her and myself and a few other folks, John McKenzie, fellow Lowell from Lions, can't remember everyone else, there was a few of us, to form a committee to see about the possibilities, the location, how realistic it would be, and to set a mission for a regular farmers market. Because I said people were gathering, I think, on Saturdays down at the on Pearl Street Mall there, but they wanted to set a more permanent location and one that could attract, new farmers, new young farmers to grow, to save agricultural land in Boulder County. And so, city approached us to form this this committee and make a proposal to them. So I was on, that was kind of my, peak years at Alfalfa's. So Kathy and I and John McKenzie, we, kind of looked at different areas, looked at the viability of a full-time market, were there potential new growers that would come along. And we determined, yes, that Boulder was a prime location, seeing the success of local and organic foods that we were selling at Alfalfa's at that time. We considered Boulder to be a prime location, and I wrote the original proposal that I sent back to the city suggesting that they go to 13th Street, and then in 1987 the market opened on where it still resides.
Do you remember some of the things that your group looked into and what you investigated?
Well, we looked at, I was already at Alfalfa's working with a number of local growers, and I was regularly having people come to me, young kids who are wanting to get into farming, and interviewing to see if there's, were there going to be enough farmers, which we determined so, and certainly my experience with Alfalfa's, where even at that point, organic was making strong headway, as was locally grown. And in fact, at Alfalfa's, in our produce departments, we sort of had a pyramid of preference, and the pyramid was that the absolute finest produce you could buy was really good quality, locally grown, organically grown fruits and vegetables. And that's what we were seeking out throughout the state and eventually throughout the entire country. But certainly in season, buying locally grown, organic Colorado vegetables and fruits. So.
Was there a lot of locally grown organic produce at the time?
It was tough. It was tough. There certainly wasn't the kind of plethora that there is now, but you'd be surprised. There was a lot of fruit. Fruit was becoming popular. There were a lot of guys like White Buffalo and Bertie Heidelman, and guys who were experimenting and starting to develop sizable orchards in the Western Slope. And there was, farms were starting to crop up, so to speak, around Boulder and out east and south. So yeah, it was more than you might think. And certainly alfalfa has provided a very good test ground for how interested customers were in buying local and organic. And that's about the same time even the state was beginning its ABC program, which was the Always Buy Colorado. So, yeah.
So yeah, I remember the ABC, so they were actually also focused on local farmers. And
they were, not specifically organic, but more locally produced. And I actually recall it was during that same period of time that I served on the board of COPA, Colorado Organic Producers Association. And we were the first committee that established the regulations defining organic for crops grown in Colorado. That's before the national program existed. So our task was, which we did and which we got passed through, that took about solid two and a half years. But through COPA we did establish the first guidelines for organics.
So then actually, I don't know when, it's right, alfalfa is located where alfalfa is now.
Now, where it's
so
come
you're
back
actually
to,
very close to the Boulder Farmers Market.
Right, we
so
were.
you didn't think that was a conflict, or?
No. I remember really didn't think it was a conflict because the growers then, I knew all of them. They were my friends. I mean, the Munsons, Chet, these guys were all my buddies and friends. And, they were selling to us in the market. To us, it was more, and quite honestly, a lot of people would come on Saturday and, if they bought some produce there, fine. They'd come to alfalfa's and buy things that they, weren't available at the market. So, no conflict. I remember what we were trying to determine, which is funny because it's kind of come full circle and is an issue now. We were just wondering, while it was so aesthetically pleasing to have the market downtown and would create a real community hub, were the market to really expand and grow, was it practical with parking and farm vehicles? So we were also looking at areas almost where Whole Foods is now. There was more open space in those days, or kind of where 29th Street Mall, I don't remember exactly, but back then in the mid-'80s, there was a lot more space down there.
Yes.
So we were wondering, would it be better to do it in a location that could really grow, maybe didn't have the immediate aesthetics, and wasn't right in the heart of downtown, but certainly where you could bring in lots of farm vehicles, and which is probably a dilemma that we still ponder at the market.
Right, yeah. We make it work, right, every Saturday.
But certainly the scale of it, we thought in those days, 13th Street would be the most appropriate at that time, and were it to grow, that maybe someday we would move to a larger location.
So you said you got first involved while you were still with alfalfas. So when did you get involved in farming, and why?
Well, the farm, that's kind of another funny story. My wife Sylvia and I were, we at that point had 3 kids, would soon have our 4th, and we had been renting a home on 4th Street and wanted to buy a house. And we thought we'd buy something in the country, 5-6 acres, and have a nice big garden and some room for the kids and, that sort of thing. And we were trying to buy this house in Lyons at a beautiful property. The house was a crazy kind of monstrosity of a house, and it fell through, and we were getting really discouraged and couldn't find anything. And I remember we had been notified that someone else was going to buy the house, and we couldn't qualify. Yeah, where we were looking at this place in Lyons, and we weren't going to qualify, and other people were going to put down extra money, yada yada yada. So we were driving around really despondent and kind of down. And we happened to drive by Chet's place, who's, practically my next door neighbor now. And we're driving by, and we described our forlorn story about her not getting the house, and would we ever find the right place. And Chet said, "Oh, don't worry, don't get down, guys. Something will show up just around the corner." So we drove up, and he wasn't being literal, he was just speaking figuratively. But so we drove up, and quarter mile up the road, took a bend, and saw this ragamuffin, falling down, crazy old farmhouse it was still standing, still had its windows, and granted there were skunks and raccoons living in it, and the barn was half blown down, and there was wire and trash everywhere. But it said that there were 35 acres available with the property and water rights. So we looked at the house, and it was like, no, nothing was cracked, nothing was broken, needed some paint, needed to get rid of the skunks and raccoons and clean up the place. And then we took a walk back on these beautiful sweeping fields that went up the side of the mesa there. We got to the edge of the property and looked out, and you could see the Twin Sisters and Pikes Peak in the distance and the mountains close by, just a wonderful panoramic view. And as I said, this was actually 1992 before we actually purchased it. And Sil and I looked at each other and said, wow, this doesn't exist. This is only 15 minutes north of Boulder. It's like, the places like this don't exist. So with a lot of difficulty, because in trying to get loans and things, it was a classic property where the value was all in the land and literally nothing in the house. Those kind of places even then were hard to get loans on. But with stick-to-itness, we were able to get a loan, and we bought what would become Pastures of Plenty.
Oh, all right.
And that was 92. And then, made the house livable, had babies in drawers that looked like chests because there wasn't much room. But started landscaping, fixed up the house, and kind of tilled up our first acre and a half. And that year, headed off to farmers markets with some salad greens and flowers that we still grow.
So what did you grow then at the beginning? At
the beginning, as I said, Chet had told me about his philosophy of the bend-over factor. Bend-over factor is something very simple. It was, in those days, you could plant, you could weed, you could bend over and harvest a bunch of beets, and you could get $1.50 in those days, really, for the bunch of beets. Or you could basically do the same amount of work and harvest a bouquet of flowers and get $10 for it. And that's where Chet educated me about the bend-over factor. So, and in those days, mesclun mixed salad greens, whatever, they were still kind of a premium crop. They weren't the kind of standard lettuce. In those days, it was still head lettuce and heads of red or green leaf.
Yes.
They were still kind of a novelty. So we set about and grew lots of different salad green mixes and grew flowers. And quite honestly, cut flowers and different salad green mixes still form, the backbone of our product selection today. So.
Yeah, so you were a trailblazer, because I remember when I came to the United States, it was iceberg lettuce in 1977.
Right, yeah.
So when you planted, your salad mixes and flowers, did you right away think that you'll be selling them at the farmer's market? Was that the intent?
That was my intention. At that point, as I said, I didn't sell out of alfalfas until 1996. So for those first 3 years, I was kind of learning my way through the farm, but my intention was always to sell at farmers markets. I also love farmers markets because I've traveled quite a bit. I went to college in Mexico, and said my mom was French-Italian, raised in Paris, so I've spent a lot of my time growing up and in my early 20s traveling. And I always have loved markets, loved the open-air markets in Italy and Mexico, and so I've always been attracted to markets, open-air markets, farmers markets, and I'm also kind of a food anthropologist. I love authentic regional cuisine, be it Greece, Vietnam, wherever it might be. So those have always been two of my passions. So yeah, part of going to the farmers market was, it was fun, and I really look forward to it.
So you said you planted 1.5 acres. So how many acres do you have now?
Now we have about 20, and we have 35 acres in the farm. There's about 20 under cultivation. Normally we're keeping 1/3 to 1/4 of that in a cover crop or resting. So we're usually harvesting off 14, 15 acres, something like that.
And how many of those are flowers?
It's probably 50-50, because after that first year, my first significant investment was in peonies. And that was kind of Sylvia's idea. Sylvia was a big fan of peonies because she had done a lot of catering, and for weddings and things, peonies were always a kind of coveted, crop, flower. And so that what would become the fall of our first year, we planted 2,000 peonies.
Wow.
And today we have a little over 3,000 peonies, between 3,000 and 4,000 peonies. But yeah, we're kind of 50-50. And as I was telling you earlier, it's a good cycle where we start with the hanging baskets in May, Mother's Day, and for May from the greenhouses. In June and the first part of July, flowers tend to dominate our harvest. And then as we get deeper and deeper in the season, when we get into August and September, vegetables are probably even a little higher percentage than flowers. But overall, it's about 50-50.
So what else do you have in addition to salad greens?
Well, we grow all kinds of winter and summer squash. We've often been known for our green beans. We try to pick our green beans. We grow haricot vert, and then we've grown some varieties that are not true haricot vert, but they're very thin. And same with our summer squash. We pick a lot of things very small. Our summer squash, we try to pick the way you'll see in the south of France, very small, often with the flower. But just a full range of vegetables, winter, summer squash, beans, root vegetables, the whole thing. And flowers, we grow about, I think it's almost now 70 varieties.
Wow.
And there's certain varieties like lilies, lithianthus, dahlias, certain varieties that are not appropriate for the fields. They're the higher end, higher value flowers, and those we grow in a combination of greenhouses and high tunnels. So at this point, we've got 3 greenhouses and 3 high tunnels, which are kind of open-ended greenhouses.
Oh, right, yeah. I have seen that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are also very nice settings. I had a dinner in one of these.
Oh, did you? Nice,
yes.
nice.
So not to forget, I don't think I've asked you the name of your business.
Oh, the farm. What's actually, I own 2 businesses, which is the kind of other evolution of our farm. But the farm is Pastures Aplenty, and our other business is Big Bang Catering. And actually, there's a third one, Fresh Ideas Group, which is a public relations firm that still runs 3.
Yes.
But Pastures Aplenty is the farm, and then Big Bang Catering is the catering company.
Yeah, you're both very industrious. Yeah, it's a shame that Sylvia couldn't be here today.
Yeah.
So I need to catch her at a separate time because to talk about her involvement in the market. And as you said, she owns Fresh Ideas Group that does marketing for natural foods companies.
And in fact, she's down in Denver now with the folks of The Kitchen, because The Kitchen, which is one of the true farm-to-table restaurants that, walk their talk. Hugo's great guy, wonderful chef, and Kitchen's opening up down in Denver. Right. So, and they're also very involved in school gardens. So that's. Yeah.
So which other markets do you attend other markets?
We do. Yeah, I think we're a little different from most of the Boulder folk. We actually attended 8 different. We were at market 8 different days last season. I think we're going to cut back a little, but we go to Boulder twice a week. We go to Cherry Creek twice a week. We go to Dillon and to Evergreen.
Oh, all right.
And we've even gone at times to Minturn and Vail as well. So we kind of get around. We go to a bunch of them.
So what in your mind is different and special about the Boulder Farmers Market versus the other markets?
Well, that it's the others are, while there's some farmers there, they're to varying degrees kind of big flea markets or, food court flea markets. Boulder is the most genuinely, farmer-based, farmers selling what they grow. There's obviously much more stringent restrictions at Boulder to maintain its integrity and uniqueness, which is valuable. So you don't find that. So even though Cherry Creek is kind of a big sprawling market that does very well for us, you know, there's still a much lower percentage of farmers. Although my feelings, you know, Boulder could use a little bit higher percentage of farmers itself. But
so do you want to mention some of the restrictions, right, that you mentioned that makes Boulder
well, basically, if you know what you sell, you have to grow if you're a farmer. I mean, that's the key component, and that's what's kept Boulder, at least from the grower side, as a, you know, it's maintained its integrity as a true farmer's market.
So, well, I'll save the questions about the Wednesday market for Sylvia.
Yeah.
But I wanted to ask you: have you ever served on the board of the Boulder market?
I have. I can't remember the years, but I think it was maybe 4, 5, and 6. 3, 4, 5. I did a 3-year stint on the board. Yeah.
But you don't remember exactly when that was?
I think it's 4, 5, 6. I think it's that period.
So 2000.
Jim Schott was the head. Schott was the president,
yes.
And I think Sally was the market manager. Maybe not the whole time, but at least a portion of it. But Jim was definitely the head of the board, president.
So
of the board.
yeah, you're talking about 2005, 4, 5, and 6.
6, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Dave Asbury was there. Yeah. Ewell was there.
So do you remember some of the major issues and decisions while you were on the board?
Well, one of the things that I think we were able to do is we felt that it was critical that we improve our relationship with the city, and that the city maybe not take us too much for granted and not just look at it as sort of a financial boon on their part and for downtown Boulder, but they needed to show a little bit more appreciation of what they had, and that Boulder's one of the best farmers markets in the country, very well attended, obviously a boon not just for the city, for the taxes they've collected from the market, but also for the whole downtown as a whole. So there was, working with Sylvia, my wife Sylvia, we definitely established a PR campaign, and we had some of the first major meetings and real inroads with the city, and that was the beginning talks of now finally getting rid of the islands and the trees. But more than just specific changes like that, it was to have a stronger relationship with the city. So that was part of it. You know, another big part was the ongoing debate, as it still kind of is what's the appropriate balance between farmers and food service vendors and craft fairs. And quite honestly, I've always been a strong proponent of having it be an even more producer-based. You know, the two philosophies were, one, just get as many people down there as you possibly can. If it's event-like, so be it. It'll be a town celebration, a community event. Just get them down there. You know, and things like the crafts fair were, well, you know, if we don't manage the crafts fair, that's just money that's going to go to someone else. Honestly, that as a board member, and you know, I was in the minority, was not my stance. I think it's kind of gotten too out of balance, primarily because I think the things that make the market are detrimental to customers are parking, ease of shopping, things like that. So I was kind of always in favor of reducing the food court and having there be more how would you say, restrictions or having it be a more selective process as to those food service vendors having to use a higher degree of local products themselves. And the food service court has actually improved quite a bit since, it was even, 5, 6, 7 years ago, where there were guys just kind of opening cans of Noble Cisco things. And, yeah, and I've often thought that Boulder should look at the model that Santa Barbara has, which is they have their farmers market twice a week, but then regularly once a week they also have a crafts fair. And where all the artisans come down, and it's every Sunday. And I have often wondered if Boulder couldn't follow that model, that you do the farmer's market, and yes, you have a food court, but maybe the people at the food court are those who use a little higher percentage of local, and then you have this kind of regular artisan crafts fair every week, even if the farmer's market were in charge of it, that you had artists come down, had a more extensive food court, and so, an idea.
And so how is it done now, right, with arts and crafts?
Well, now, because, I think I think there's six fairs that they have there, so, I don't know, it's 4 or 6. It seems like there's about one Saturday out of every month, there's the crafts fair that spills into the park there, and it's always just, a madhouse as far as parking and kind of getting set up, and, yeah, but, yeah.
Yeah, that is a challenge. It is partly the location and having so many farmers and vendors there.
I mean, it's a good problem because the reality is the farmers market has been immensely successful. It's immensely popular. I think perhaps the only figure that's a little bit, I think it was a bit up this year, but essentially, for the majority of the past 5 years, most of the growth in the farmers market has not been in farm sales. It's been in sales of, food or prepared food or other things. And that's, that's a little bit of certainly a concern. Not a little, it is a concern.
So have you ever talked to customers about it, what they're looking for? Because the argument I hear is that, customers enjoy and appreciate the variety. Yeah,
I mean, I hear both. I would certainly those whose primary mission is to come down and buy, vegetables, flowers, fruits, to buy produce. They tend to be those who are not so in favor of the kind of festival community thing that the market's turned into. Then you have those that are more casual shoppers that just love going down. They want to get a coffee, or they want to get a little bit of food, and they might buy some corn or a little bit of this and that. But so I mean, certainly there's a wide variety of shoppers at the Boulder market.
So is there anything you are particularly proud of while you were on the board, of any rule changes, additions?
There's no single thing that comes to mind, but as I said, I think we started to make some of the most positive inroads with the city, and I think that's very valuable, because I simply think the city kind of underappreciated what they had. And it was a bit taken for granted, and certainly being such a wonderful farmers market, it shouldn't be.
So do you remember what some of the PR activities were?
It's a little vague, but I know that Sally was the market manager, and I remember there was a large meeting that Sylvia created with Sally and Jim Schott and the kind of the city leaders at the time, the mayor and some of the other folks, and I forget who one of the main women who worked for the city, I can't remember her name, but there was this instrumental meeting where Sally and Jim were able to, air kind of their frustration and their desire to have, a better relationship, but just feel a little more appreciated. And it was a very positive meeting, and that was instrumental in, continuing to develop that relationship.
So some more questions along the same lines, right? do you remember any challenges in the growth of the market while you were on the board or at other times?
No, you know, as I said, kind of the core conflict was that what is the nature of the market? You know, is it a farmer's market? Is it, you know, that was always at the core. You know, and then there was also the discussions of, which is something I think we face right now, is do we need more full-time administrative help? You know, I think it might have been in my last year or shortly thereafter, can't recall, where the position, when Mark was promoted to the position of an executive director. Might have been just after, but that was certainly in our discussion, that market managers needed to be paid somewhat more, that it was becoming a more demanding job, and was there a need for someone with, you know, a little more expertise who could really manage the market and not simultaneously be a market manager as well as an executive director or a director. So that was all that was coming to fruition then. You know, and that's obviously something we're facing now, that, you know, is there a need for an executive director? And another thing that I would bring up, and I still think, and it's not something we've done, but I was actually in favor of bringing people onto the board that were not necessarily members. I thought it could be valuable to maybe have some city planners, to have some local business leaders, to have a lawyer, to have someone in construction, whatever it might be, that I thought, while you would definitely want the majority to be you know, farmer members, that I've always thought the board would benefit from other advocates in, you know, advocates of the market, but in different areas of expertise, finance.
Well, that's an interesting idea. Like, yeah, an adjunct member. There are some other associations I'm a member of where they have members like that to reach out, to hear from outside the close community.
Yeah, I mean, I think my background with alfalfas, I just was, you know, trying to look at the farmer's market as, a passion and something I loved, and a means of making living in a meaningful way, but also as a, you know, it was, you know, it's however millions of dollars it's doing now, it's a significant business.
Yes,
it's a significant business entity, and, you know, a lot of times there were not people with a lot of business acumen on the board.
Yeah, well, I mean, it is still very much managed by farmers, that farmers are on the board. If I remember right, between Longmont and Boulder, both Saturday and Wednesday, wasn't the number, like the total revenue, $5 million?
Yeah, I know, it's I think
incredible business, yes.
It is, so.
And it has been in business for 25 years, a huge accomplishment for any business, right? And many of the farmers have been there for decades, right?
So we're all kind of entrepreneurs in a sense, but yeah.
So what do you, in your mind, makes the Boulder farmers market work for farmers?
Well, certainly we have a built-in, you know, advocacy. There's lots of great customers out there in Boulder, as is evidenced by how many darn grocery stores and natural food stores there are. There's a real love of buying local, buying organic, buying fresh. You know, the restaurant scene is further evidence. Boulder's just a great market. There's a lot of advocates here, a lot of passionate consumers, and that's, I think, the main thing. We have a good fan base.
So you think that the Boulder farmers market has kind of changed and improved the economics of farming in Boulder?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, really, even on that committee I was describing, looking for a permanent location, the primary objective was to create a viable means for small family farms to survive and proliferate within Boulder. And as all of us know who do small family farms, there's two key components. One is, getting a retail price. For a small farmer to be able, be it a roadside stand, be it, be it the farmer's market, be it a CSA, it's very critical to be able to get that retail price. And the other is that, as I think becoming more and more evident, and that transitioning, as I said, I kind of went my final year with alfalfas to 1 year farming full time. Well, it didn't take me very long, even though we're kind of a big little farm and do a number of markets, didn't take me very long to realize that I wasn't going to raise 4 kids on a 35-acre farm going to farmers markets. And we're all looking for different value added. And that's when I had the catering company that we used just kind of part-time to make extra vacation money and stuff. And Sylvia and I, for many years, actually it's a good story I'll tell, had talked about what we called field to table. And that's when I started the catering company full-time with an emphasis on holding events and parties at our farm. So it'd be one location where the food would be grown, harvested, prepared, consumed, and celebrated, all at the single spot.
So I think I want to now focus on some final questions. What do you think are some of the important factors that make the Boulder Farmers Market successful?
Well, I think one, as I said, obviously having a great fan base is huge, and then having, great players. And it's a really good team of players down there. There's a number of just excellent farmers, creative people, a lot of really good people on the food court too. Now we have wonderful cheese makers, but, from Ann Cure to Wyatt at Red Wagon to old timers like myself and the Munsons and Chet, to people like Haystack, people like yourself selling Colorado wine. There's just a great diversity of creative, hardworking, good-hearted people down there.
Yeah, so then, as you said, you started in 1993. Mm-hmm. What makes you come back every year after year? As you mentioned, it is a lot of work, and you realize you can't raise a family on that income.
Right. I mean, I just love it. I really love doing it. Still love farmers markets. And honestly, with the now called farm to table component, which I love as well. I mean, that's actually even my true passion is, doing kind of events at our farm where it's our vegetables, our flowers. It's something like a person's wedding that's a very meaningful day in their life, that they're sharing that experience, eating, food that I've grown, or, foods grown by my other friend producers. That's just very, very meaningful. And so one quick story I was going to tell you is that Sylvia and I had recently become a couple, and we took our first kind of road trip together. And we were going to go down and climb Mount Blanca and climb it from the backside up Ellingwood, which is a very hard climb. And it took us all day. It was very technical. And we got to Ellingwood, and it was just a little too far to get to the top of Blanca. So we went down, and it was still a great climb, amazing accomplishment. And then we were going to rest a few days in Taos. So we went down to Taos, kind of eating food, looking at art galleries, but we got antsy again to climb. So we went just outside Taos by the ski area is Mount Wheeler. And Mount Wheeler is the highest mountain in New Mexico. So we were climbing, and we just got, and this is in the late 80s, we got immersed in this conversation about, wow, wouldn't it be cool to do a field to table kind of thing? where we would have a farm and we would grow, even if it wasn't a farm, we'd have a big garden and we'd have people over and we would do farm dinners. And that was our first conversation. I think that was something like 1987 or something like that, when we were thinking about the dream of doing a field to table venue. And which is the other story about the crazy thing of buying our farm, you know, where Chet said, don't be discouraged, just up ahead. And we bought, and also, you know, kind of laid the groundwork for us to create, you know, Pastures of Plenty and Big Bang and this, you know, this initial kind of farm to table experience we created.
So can you come actually to your farm outside of having a wedding?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you come say hi and visit. I'll make you lunch, sure. But yeah, I mean, we don't really do so many of the farm dinners per se, because most of the events are more life events, weddings, anniversaries, parties. We always do, you know, 5 or 6 nonprofit. We're actually doing one for Farm Aid this year. We're doing, see if we can get Willie or Neil out there. I doubt it, but we should have some musicians, and we are going to do a Farm Aid event. So past few years we've been doing events for the school lunch program. So what makes it fun for you to go to the market? Just as I was saying before, even, you know, as a kid, you know, kind of what I call food anthropology, open air markets. It's a passion I've had since I was a young man, and it's just kind of stuck with me.
So now, as I think I am now done with all my questions, I wanted to check with you whether you have anything else you want to add about the farmers market and.
No, just that you know, it's don't have a bit of regret, love the whole thing. You know, even if I have certain opinions about where it could be tweaked and changed, my overall, you know, passion and feeling for the market is nothing but, you know, goodness.
So what we'll do now is take a short pause and set up some pictures to talk about the farm and the farmers market.
Sounds good.
We are back for the interview with Lyle Davis, and now we will look at some of the pictures of the early days on the farm and in the farmers market. So what are we seeing here, Lyle?
That is a flower that we still grow today. It's a lovely one called Agri Stemma, and that's actually on that original 1.5 acres just east of our home. That's our home, Pastures of Plenty. And Agri Stemma's got a fun story because it was Thomas Jefferson's favorite flower, but it was banned, and this isn't, you know, colonial America, obviously, but it was banned for 200 years because it proved to be poisonous to cattle. And then the Dutch did a kind of rediscovered it, created a more floriferous form of it, and it wasn't poisonous, and it's kind of made, it's become a very popular cut flower. The other difference is we probably wouldn't let things be that fully bloomed. That's an old picture from the late 90s, and we've learned now that we have to cut things a little sooner to get to make them last. So that's a rare picture because it probably wouldn't be quite that fully bloomed nowadays. We'd cut it a little earlier.
I can also take. Should I put them? Yeah. Which one do you want me to show next?
I could show this one.
All right. Let me replace this. And this is a picture of?
That is a very early picture of our first years. I would guess that's probably 1994, 95. At the Boulder market. Looks like it's a Saturday. And the funny thing is, we were at the main path. We were on the west side of the street, but at the main path that entered into the courtyard and on the sidewalk. And our stand was split in half. We had half of it to the north and half of it to the south. But that's probably August, because you can see something else we've always done, we were talking about earlier, is we've always grown flowers and vegetables. So you can see obviously all the bouquets, but there's also some Romano beans and purple beans, as well as mixed salad greens and gold beets. So kind of our format has always been a combination of flowers and vegetables.
And then we have another picture.
And that's another one setting up. a somewhat younger and skinnier me, and that's setting up at a Boulder Farmers Market, probably that same era, something 19, who knows, 94, 95, right around that time frame. And yeah, another early 90s photo at the Boulder Farmers Market.
We take another short pause for another photo. We're back to the interview with Lyle Davis with another 2 pictures, and Lyle, go ahead, what do we see?
Yeah, the first picture here, one with I actually still have that Pastures Aplenty banner. It's pretty torn up and ratty, but it's sort of like an old favorite t-shirt. Don't want to get rid of it and keep it there. Obviously this is September because I see some winter squash, looks like gold kabochas, and a variety of peppers, and a lovely display of cosmos. And I actually remember when that was taken, and that's a Wednesday market, so it's not quite as full of a stand, but that's the old days when Wednesday used to be a day market.
And then what do we see then below?
And then down below is one of the arbors. That's actually where we set up a bar and serve appetizers and have antique furniture. So that's in the back part of our property in the area where we host events. There's a couple of other arbors with antique furniture. There's a big bonfire pit, and there's even a complete outdoor working kitchen with a big grill and wood-fired oven and antique sinks. But that's kind of probably just a couple of years after we built our first arbor, because all these grasses and things are much more grown in and mature at this point.
Good. Well, thank you so much again, Lyle, for coming today. I'm so glad you had the time to talk to us.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Glad to have done it.